There's too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying. You know we've got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Ooh, Father, Father, we don't need to escalate. War is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. You know we've got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Picket lines and picket signs to punish me with brutality. You gotta talk to me so you can see what's going on. What's going on? What's going on? Yeah, what's going on? Ooh, la 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 la. La 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 la. Do 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 everybody thinks we're wrong, but who are they to judge us? Just because our hair's too long. Oh, you know we've got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Picket lines and picket signs don't punish me with brutality. You better talk to me so you can see what's going on. What's going on? Yeah, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Ooh, what's going on, baby? What's going on? Yeah, yeah, what's going on? Hey, Maureen, what's going on? Hey, Todd Fink, what's going on? Oh, oh, oh.
What is going on?
What is going on? What's going on with my hair? That's what I'd like to know.
Your hair looks awesome. You're like a
Really?
goddess. Yeah.
Oh, it's falling out. I'm going to the doctor on Tuesday. I finally.
Don't even say that. Sometimes it's a thyroid thing. Sometimes we all shed in the summertime. Don't even think.
No, it's not that. It's not that. It's
it's
literally falling out. I'm going to the doctor. It's so thin. I know it looks curly right now because I slept in ponytails.
It looks beautiful. You're gorgeous bald. You could rock anything. Hey, you guys, welcome to SpeakEasy. We're so grateful that you're here today. Kathy Richardson is going to sing us through this whole Sunday service, and we're so grateful for her. But really, your presence here is the real gift. And if you want to support these conversations, we really appreciate that. We know people are going through tough times, but it's always good to stay in the flow and support good people doing good things, and we qualify. We have a great speaker for you today. Todd Fink is an addiction specialist. He's a mindfulness coach. He's, like he said, a musician from the Giving Tree Band. He has this amazing podcast that can keep you entertained for hours and hours and hours. It's called the Kind Mind Podcast. I highly recommend it. He's a great friend to many of us here at SpeakEasy, and he's here to talk about the art of conversation. So if you have not heard of him before, lean in because you're in for a treat. There you are. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you. It's good to be here with all of you.
Mm-hmm.
Since Maureen and I talked about this idea for a topic the art of dialogue. My social media has been inundated with advertisements for improving your conversation skills. So maybe I need to take them up on that, and then I'll have more to report next time. But I do think this topic is more relevant now than ever before. We're facing multiple challenges, multiple crises, including uh, the pandemic, health crisis, public health crisis, economic crisis, fight for justice. And we're seeing the pandemic expose more of the wealth and health inequality throughout the country and around the world. I think we're also in a very unique situation when dealing with these different challenges, because we have a culture that more or less rewards people for being great at one thing. And we're encouraged and incentivized to be great at one thing. That's where you can get the most success in the capitalist system. But then it's very difficult to be able to see all the sides of a problem. And so I would say more than ever before, we really have to come together and work together to solve our problems, because it's quite probable that no one person can really see things in their full light. But that's both a challenge and also a blessing at the same time, because when we realize that and we do come together, I think we can make significant progress. I first got introduced to the word dialogue itself when I was in college. I had a wonderful professor in cognitive science named Dr. Carl Pribram. And I would encourage you to check out my podcast episode, Unlost in Transition, in the Kind Mind podcast, where I narrate my initial meeting with Dr. Pribram. It was very serendipitous and synchronistic. But anyways, he was a collaborator with a quantum physicist named David Bohm. So I got introduced to his work then. And in addition to his scientific brilliance, he also had a way of communicating ideas and conversing with luminaries outside of the realm of physics and mathematics. He's famous for having a decades-long conversation with Indian mystic and philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti. And I started listening to those conversations, and they were deep dive into the fundamental nature of reality. And they would be trying to understand what is time, what is consciousness, what is real. And they would do so in a very slow and methodical manner. And I realized, listening to those conversations, that dialogue is a process, and you have to have some special qualities to engage in it. And David Bohm started to promote those qualities. So let's look at the word dialogue itself. It actually comes from Greek, dialogos. Di means two, refers to two people, two or more people engaging in conversation. But logos refers to meaning. You may have heard of logotherapy. Logotherapy was developed by the psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. He was a survivor of the Holocaust, and after spending more than 2 years in concentration camps, he went on to live for another 50 years. He lost his entire family, rebuilt his life, and spread his message of meaning, and how if you can make sense of suffering, you can be resilient. And inside of the suffering that we're all experiencing, through loss, through uncertainty, is the seed of transformation. Suffering can really provide us clarity. You don't wish suffering upon anybody, but when you find yourself in it, your best bet, according to Viktor Frankl and people who have been through such intense adversity, is to search for meaning. So when you have a dialogue between two or more people, the aim is not to win. So now we see today that much of the exchange in communication online, especially, quickly deteriorates into judgment, blaming, attacking, and most of all, debate. Debate is one of the oldest sports in the world, but I don't think we realize going into conversation with each other, with our loved ones, with our partner, that we're not really intending to have a debate, that we don't really seek to win anything. So even if you're right in a debate with your loved one, what is it that you win? You probably stand to lose the relationship by just fighting to be right. And sometimes we do this over the smallest things, like a memory, like a time when something happened, and just having a dispute there can totally unravel everything that we care about in relationships. So dialogue is different in that the two people do not intend to be right. They're more interested in getting it right than being right. And so it's not a zero sum game. It's not like if one of them figures it out or convinces the other person loses everything. If any of the two people hit at something correct and it's agreed upon, it's a win-win. So it's not a zero sum game. The goal of the dialogue for those participating is to work together, to collaborate in an open spirit and in a respectful way to find meaning beyond the sum of the parts of the two people. And we just don't have enough of that right now. But if people could understand how this is different from debate, from argument, and especially some of the subtler words that we use that sound positive but still can quickly deteriorate into this, like discussion. Discussion has this root word cuss, like percussion, concussion. Cuss means to strike or to tear, and dis means apart. So discussion actually means to tear each other apart. And I don't think that's what we aspire to do. But by just grounding ourselves in this concept of dialogue, we can begin in a more open, respectful spirit. Now, I think social media presents a real challenge to this. And as we try to parse the 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 packaging of huge issues like justice, like economic um, balance in our country, we get lost and you get confined to a tweet. 200 character tweet is your chance to make sense of everything that's going on. And if you make a mistake in that tweet or you leave anything out, you you've sent something invidious. And I feel like almost everybody feels like anything I could say has the potential to incite anger in others. And that's because you can't have a dialogue with a limit of 200 characters. A dialogue can't take place through a meme. Dialogue can't take place through um, just through a single social media post. But we inherit that, I think, to a great extent from the way that we elect political officials through debate. I mean, what a strange thing in America that we base our understanding of how candidates will move our country forward or not move our country forward based on who can get in a gotcha moment within 30 seconds or who can say something that can become a viral hashtag within a minute. And so what you end up getting is a lot of straw man fallacies. That is when people argue against a point that the opponent wasn't even making. We saw this and heard this in the response to the protest, to riots, to the uprising, and those pursuing justice for George Floyd and so many other Black brothers and sisters like Breonna Taylor and more. And there was a reaction that some people were saying we're not going to make George Floyd a martyr. And yet nobody was actually arguing for that. But it can be, when you hear it enough, it can be a powerful, persuasive strategy. I saw this a lot in the primary debates, coming from almost every candidate, where they would say things like, I think it's important that we bring people together. And if you hear that enough, you start to believe that the other person actually wants to divide America. So if you want to participate and be a part of the healing of America, we have to be open to this concept of dialogue. And I'm trying to do my best to help people understand what this word actually means. I like to lead an activity when I'm in the hospital working with groups of patients. And we take a controversial topic like legalization of drugs, like abortion, like crime, like nuclear war, keeping nuclear weapons, developing nuclear weapons, nuclear proliferation, and sex before marriage, all different kinds of topics that you might get heated debate on. But I limit all the participants to just one word. The only thing they can share is the value that it touches on for them. So we go around the room, and as difficult as it is, they can only start by sharing that value. And you quickly see that everybody feels something totally different. People might say safety, freedom, patience, healing, health, understanding. But as we open it up to further dialogue from there, now the participants are interested in why this triggers safety in you. And they realize that if they were just arguing the point, they wouldn't really be arguing from the same place. There wouldn't be an understanding. They wouldn't be on the same reference frame. So this is the beginning. And it's important to understand what it is we're even talking about. You take something like America and the history of America, and people personify America. America's always hiding its shadow, for instance. Well, it begs the question, what is America? And if we say it's a country, it's this land, and you can point to all the borders, then why wasn't this land America 1,000 years ago? What did this land do to make itself America? Well, then you might say, well, I guess it's people. Well, the people then who might have made it America, they're not here now. And so maybe it's like a corporation. The people come and go. The heads of the corporation are interchangeable, and there's a hierarchy. But as you can see, it gets complicated because people can come and go, and it might seem strange to think that I would live and die for a corporation. It's got to be something beyond that. So maybe it's a social construct, it's an idea. And then you start to say, well, if it's an idea, then is it really real? Well, maybe the idea isn't real, but there really is a humanitarian crisis at the imaginary border. So something that's not real has real correlates. And then you could say, well, maybe it's like a religion, that if enough people believe, you can have these real effects. But in the end, religions come and go, corporations come and go. So I sometimes philosophically think that America is an event. It has a beginning, maybe it will have an end, but it's an experiment in democracy, an experiment in values, in virtues, but hopefully that experiment, with all its flaws, can keep testing and correcting those flaws, and ideally improve that experiment. So the last thing I'd like to say is that I would encourage you to not fall into debate, not fall into argument, to to invite people into dialogue with you, to explain this to others, and be able to add nuance and context to these very complicated topics, to wear a mask, to not wear a mask. We know what our perspective is, and we know that we might want people to get onto our side. People are ready to move people over to where they are. But the problem is they don't always know where they're moving a person from. You're going to help somebody move, you got to know where their old address is. And the only way to do that is to go deeper. And when you do, you find out that we all have different pain points. We're forgetting that people argue, people fight because there's somewhere inside where they're hurting. And as compassionate people, as spiritual people, we ought to care about that. And I think you approach these conversations much differently when you have a sense of where the pain is. And it all begins by deep listening. When I'm talking, I'm only sharing what I know. If I'm not willing to listen, then I have nothing to learn. So I'm excited for our conversation. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you feel open and free to bring up anything, and even bring up the obstacles to dialogue. Like we can explore cancel culture and what that means. But ultimately, spirituality is about trying to know the truth, the most fundamental truths. And if you're a spiritual person that goes that deep, trying to answer the question, who am I? You can always operate from that sense of oneness, that sense of the ground of being. And you're less likely then to get torn up by one's own ego. So thank you for the opportunity to be here with you, to share. And I look forward to more music from Kathy and an open dialogue with you all shortly. Thank you.
I just want to say I love the everything that was said, Todd. Thank you so much. It's really like what I've been concentrating on right now, just the power of language and like how we just have, I'm trying to think of, he said discussion isn't the quite word, but how we can interact with each other and just know, like not come from a place of judgment. And I really like just what you said about gotcha moments and Facebook. I think Facebook, all too many times, we're coming from a place of judgment and trying to get that gotcha moment, get that win. And I could just go on and on, but I'll let other people speak. This is just like one of the topics that like is a driving force for me, because language is so crucial in like every aspect of our life.
Could I just add on to that? Thank you for sharing those insights. That we're kind of led to believe that we're all too ADD to have a dialogue. I don't really think that's true, even though things are snappy and clever and witty and short online or on social media. You do see the phenomena of long form podcasts almost replacing short interviews on mainstream media. So something like the Joe Rogan Experience has something like hundreds of millions of downloads per month. And those conversations are sometimes 3-4 hours long. You also look at shows on like Netflix that have like multiple seasons, 60 episodes, and people can stay with it for a very long stretch. So people can focus and concentrate. I also think that these conversations on podcasts are almost vicarious for us. We're actually craving deep, intimate connection with each other. And the social media is just like bringing out the worst in us sometimes. It's sort of like being in a car. You know, you have this shield around you. So if anyone makes a misstep on the road, it's immediate rage and giving the other driver the finger and calling them an idiot and taking it very personally. and we're dehumanizing ourselves sometimes in that conversation. So I think it's important to know what our goal is, and not to avoid those tools, but to come back to um, some of these other concepts of connection, and to recognize when we're just virtue signaling, or if we really aim to learn, to grow, and to work with other people in our life, to collaborate with others. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Richard's up.
Awesome.
You're muted, Richard.
I am.
No, go ahead. Just speak louder.
Oh, okay. that was awesome. Thank you very, very much for your insight. You know, as I'm watching the events unfold, like we all are, I keep going back to how do you get somebody on the same platform? I mean, first of all, your concept is that people want to be on the same plane and dialogue for an outcome. Okay, that implies finding a solution. What if the premise is not to find a solution, but as, you know, to dominate the dialogue for you know, political, social gain? How does one counter that? Or are we already set up in society that doesn't happen anymore? Like the phony debates that we have between candidates. How does this all work now?
This is a good point, good question. I think at least in our personal life, it's wise to recognize what the rules of the game are that the people are playing. You know, I can go play pickup basketball with friends without a referee, because there is a sense of sportsmanship, right? If there's no sportsmanship, and you know that people are not going to operate within that reference frame, then what is it? Is it really worth investing energy and time in if it's already sabotaged from the beginning?
Well, this is the this little moment, the sentence that you just uttered is the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Right.
because we're assuming that people are like the people who wrote the Constitution were assuming people were virtuous, were you know, worthy men and women, and had the same goal. We're just finding out that our system doesn't work if somebody doesn't have that virtuosity and goal. So how do you, you know, assuming that it is an unlevel field, where do you go?
So oftentimes these dialogues will not result in a solution. It may just be with something like the pandemic, there is no ultimate solution. You know, everything that could be done could be partly wrong. It's possible. I don't know. But I do think that America is at a crossroads. I do think, and by that I mean the community, the collective. I do think the collective is at a crisis of meaning. And that's why I keep emphasizing the word dialogue. We may not be able to come to solutions, but if you can understand yourself better and make progress towards your uh, spiritual truth, that has real value, I think. And understanding what kind of game is being played in any kind of exchange, I think, is probably the best we can do. And by modeling that, that is showing people how to be virtuous, and the benefit of virtuosity. And that is that one can stay grounded. I call this compassionate detachment, which means, you know, you're not saying you don't care. Sometimes people will 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 say, you know, I don't care what other people think, as if that's a virtue, right? But I think it's important to care. It's just not worth worrying about. So in my spiritual training, my teacher suggested to practice compassionate detachment, which means you care, but you're not worried. And that takes a lot of self-awareness, self-discovery. But to this end, I started a series on YouTube. I hope and I humbly request you all to check out my series called Live Free or Dialogue, and to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Michael Todd Fink. I put a link in the chat box, because I'm going to try to model this with a lot of different people to talk about some of the most difficult issues of our time, and be able to remain open, patient, but most of all, true to my values, which is kindness. I think that's the challenge whenever we're involved in these interactions, is that we don't want to abandon ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
If you can remain authentic but open, and enter into these conversations knowing that I'm up for being convinced, I'm up for new perspective, I'm willing to look at a situation from the other side of the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's meaning in that, even if we don't come to an understanding or we don't come to a solution. And at the very least, I can grow by taking in, also, I'll just say real quickly, when it comes to news, I tend to take the majority of my information in from those who oppose the way I feel about different issues. I already know how to filter things through my own liberal upbringing and background and training and education. So I don't need to receive it already through that lens. I already have that lens on. I would rather take in ideas and information from those who completely disagree with me. And since I've been doing that for several years, I found that I'm much more understanding, much more patient. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to join a different club or anything like that. But I can think more clearly. And that's what we're really getting at, is critical thinking and the art of clarity. I think like all of these political movements are also like mini religions, mini clubs, and cults in some cases. Even political parties can be like a cult. They're also like a grocery store. They have like one thing on sale, and you need that thing, so you go in there and you just feel like this is where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
And it may take a long time before you realize everything else is overpriced.
Mm-hmm.
But cults, which is short for culture, is useful as a tool, as a way to absorb whatever wisdom is there and to keep going. So I don't think that like having movements, clubs, religions, cultures need to be destroyed, but a person needs to be able to grow past whatever is limiting their vision. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so we have a couple people who want to share, and we're going to get them on, and we'll go to like 11:30. One thing I wanted to just share is that Todd and I met through dialogue. It was around the Me Too experience that blew up last year or the year before. And I just got tired of having the same conversation with just women in the room. And so I said, like, there has to be some men there, or else why even have the conversation? And so we ended up having conversations called Howl and Harmony, which were based on a story that Billy told me. You want to tell him that story about Howl and Harmony? Remember it?
Do you remember it?
Yeah, it was like the wolves, the indigenous people, before there was words or sounds, they would come out in the night and they would travel in packs, and the one group would howl to see if the visitors were friendly, and if the visitors were friendly, they would howl back in harmony. Remember that story?
Yeah.
And we just loved that story because we wanted to figure out how we could howl in harmony with each other. And so there's, like Todd said, there's still so many topics to cover, and it doesn't mean that we're going to leave having changed anyone's mind. But wouldn't it be cool if we left having changed our minds a little bit? and learned something and understood something. So we're doing a retreat actually at the end of the summer called Walking Around the Elephant, because there are so many elephants in the room that we all, are struggling with and making up a lot of things about. And so we're going to continue this conversation in a retreat, and we'll meet information about that on our website at SpeakEasy Spiritual Community. But next up is Barbara Clevenger wants to share something.
Thanks, Maureen.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Todd, for a very, very good talk. I'm realizing that part of the reason that we're in the little mess we're in, and I know, humanity's been getting in messes for time eternal, to get ourselves in and out, but it is so easy online, especially when you're on a keyboard, to say something unkind. And it's so difficult to do it if you're looking at somebody in the eye. Right. And I think this whole idea of, let's just say, safe space and all that kind of thing is really saying, it has gotten so mean what we say online that I want to shut down free speech, and you can only say things I want to hear. So, I think we're changing the wrong thing. What we really need is more eye to eye, or as Maureen, someone that says knee to knee. And it's so, obviously right now during this COVID-19 situation, we can't get together in the same sort of way. But I have found that Zoom, I really see people eye to eye. Not the knee to knee, but the eye to eye. And, some people like text, some people like email, some people like, phone calls. I try to talk to people in the way they like to be talked to. But boy, I really think when we can see each other's faces and be unhurried, have set up a time, been deliberate, and have some, can look at each other, it really makes a difference. But I don't know how to create it,
Thank you for sharing that. It makes a huge difference to hear a person's voice, to see their face. And I think this is a very good tool, especially during this time, as opposed to just text, tweets, posts, things like that, comments. And it's interesting also on social media, because you end up sometimes in a debate, in an argument, and you don't even know who the other person is. So how different is that really from road rage? You don't know what the person's doing, why they're driving the way they're driving, where they're going, nothing like that, where they came from. But we quickly devolve into name calling and judgment and finger pointing and so on. It's not healthy. It's good to catch ourselves before falling into those traps. Thank you.
We have one more couple that wants to share. So go ahead, and then Kathy will play us out with a song.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jim. Good to see you. Thanks, Todd. Beautiful. Great. Appreciate it a lot. I was just reflecting on the complexity, even in relation and dialogue between two people who know each other, and how tone of voice, talking about howling and harmony, that I think for me, it's about being really clear about how my voice sounds, and the interpretation of my voice by the other person. So there's to me, it seems like a huge challenge to say, I might think, oh, I'm stating an idea, and the other person thinks, oh, that's a criticism. And so we have, I think there can be this disconnect of intention that can happen even within a simple, dialogue between two people who know each other. So anyway, that was a comment.
Thank you. I think conversation is like food. Oftentimes we're so busy that our conversations are like fast food, just like we're too busy to prepare our own food oftentimes. And fast food is more salty, more fatty, more sugary, all of that. It's quick, it's not healthy, but we do the same thing, I think, with our communication. You have to invest in your well-being and the well-being of your partner. I think if you can have some time for deep conversation, even occasionally, it's like making a meal together. You feel much more nourished by the nuance, by the context, by the openness, by the time, by the patience, and the grounding that comes with being that present with each other. You have to ask good questions too, like, and lay out some of the ideas of how you could have meaningful conversation, especially in the most intimate relationships. Because I think also with the people we are the closest with, we feel a license to be the meanest to also. Or more likely to hit a boiling point with people that we're quarantining with also. But deep conversation, nuanced conversation is like making a meal from scratch.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm going. So can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Well, thank you so much, Todd. First of all, I want to let you know you look like a really good friend of ours. You look like you could be his brother.
Oh, wow.
So that's we took a picture of you because we're seeing him later today, social distancing in the backyard. We're going to show the picture. We're in Evanston, Illinois, so that was funny. And I shared a whole bunch of things on the chat because this is a topic dear to our hearts, and we do a lot of different groups and do all kinds of things with healing trauma at a deep level. Diversity and oneness is really important to us. So we've been working with this from the heart, heart to heart. Matrix is about heart to heart connection. So the experience, the heartfelt connection, and witnessing another's story as we're doing here is so beautiful. So thank you, Maureen, for having this happen. I just put 3 things on the chat already about Rumi and about Matrix leadership and about inside dialogue. So if anyone wants those resources, I put them in as far as this kind of deep conversation. I really appreciated Krishnamurti that you mentioned. So thank you so much. It was just beautiful. I just want to say thank you again.
Thank you. And before you take it, Maureen, I just wanted to encourage people to keep in touch with us about our retreat. So it'll be intimate. There'll be opportunity for going deeper into these ideas. And that harmony that Maureen mentioned is a concept in music. It's a very advanced skill in music theory. We can very easily understand how to sing a melody. Even people who've been playing music for a long time often think they're playing harmony or singing a harmony part, but they're not. So harmony essentially is, the whole point is to make the others sound more beautiful. And oftentimes the harmony is less noticeable or goes unnoticed altogether. But a person who is secure in themselves and self-aware aspires to be able to understand music that way. And I think the same is true for love and relationships. When you love and when you have compassion, you're less self-interested. There's an intellectual humility. You're not trying to bulldoze somebody with your ideas. You're trying to create the environment where they can blossom. And that environment might be space. It might be silence. It might be support. It might be illumination. And when a flower cannot grow, we don't blame the flower. We blame the environment. We try to improve the soil, the access to sunlight. And I think the same is true in society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Todd Fink. And again, go on over to Kind Mind Podcast to check out his podcast. Check out Kathy Richardson's new songs that she's been dropping. Amazing videos. I mean, just talk about like being in harmony. She is on point these days with her music. So awesome. I promised you another song, but I overpromised. I'm actually just going to pray us out. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be in harmony with all of you guys, and I really appreciate the conversations that get stirred up here through our teachers And so thank you for coming in, for participating in our conversations. And we're going to end it just in prayer and actually in a little bit of silence. So if you want to join me and take a breath and just let yourself settle into the silence and listen to the tone of your own room, of your own heart, of your own breath, just allowing yourself to be right here, because in the conversation, in the harmony, it requires that we become impeccable listeners. And so I just give thanks in this silence for this conversation, for all those that it's blessed, for all the ways that we navigate out into the world with a greater sense of care and compassion for ourselves and for the other, for the idea that we are on the cusp of something magnificent, and taking one breath and one step at a time. And if there are labor pains, that we just breathe through them, knowing that there is a greater good that is being birthed between us. So I give thanks for all of the ways that we are experiencing a greater good, and for all of the ways that we're experiencing a greater strength. And for this and so much more, I give thanks, and I surrender these intentions into the very competent energy of God's love, that it always says yes. I know that each of us are blessed from the top of our heads to the soles of our feet. And I give thanks for it, and I let it be. And together we say, and so it is. Amen.
So it is. Thank you.
Namaste. God bless. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great week.